welcome everybody. There's a link to the meeting minutes in the chat. Please go ahead and add your names to it. Add any topics that you want to. And we'll start in about a minute or two. That's a nice background, Amaya. Looks really good.
I love beaches. Thanks, Shruti. I'm just waiting for the summer to come. It's just a couple of moments. That's it.
Yeah, please having is fun, I think.
Hello, good afternoon. From here.
Hi, Innocent.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Right. I think we have enough people here. We could go ahead and start.
You've not written my name? Okay.
Just writing it. You're welcome to add it yourself as well. The meeting minutes are communal. Just hop on. There's a link in the meeting chat, I think. If you don't have it, just tell me, I'll send it again. All right. Do you want to start us off?
Sure. Hey all, but it's Wednesday, September something. September the 23rd. Nice to see everyone. I think everyone on the call has, we might have at least one lucky winner this morning. I was gonna say, I think everyone on the call has been introduced to before, but if you haven't, now is your chance to get familiar with everyone and let them get familiar with you a little bit. Bami, I know you've been hanging around and contributing in the community for a while, but I don't know, I can't quite recall if you've been, I think you introduced one time. Is that right? And Bami, I know that's maybe a nickname or a short name. So anyway, between Bami and Claire, now's your chance to say hi to everyone and just give a quick introduction to yourself. Say where you're coming from. And if you have video, turn it on.
Hi.
There she is.
Everybody. I am Oluwabamikemi Akere from Nigeria.
Ah, very good.
Short of Oluwabamikemi is Bami. Thank you.
Yeah, awesome. Where are you sitting today? Where are you at?
Okay. I am somewhere at the bar, a cafe. I'm at the cafe, yeah.
Okay. Boy, I tell you, between Amia and the beach that he's sitting at, and then where you are, I'm getting a little jealous. Nice. Very good. Very nice to have you, Bami. I thank you for some of the recent contributions you've been making. It's been good.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
It's an honor to be in the community.
Yeah. No, well, very good. Well, Claire, if you are able to say a couple of words, that would be nice. All right, Claire, if you can hear us, but you're not able to do audio, no problem. Drop a message into the chat and just say hi. Other than that, we'll move on to our first topic, which has been, there's been kind of a rash of, well, let me share this. Oh,
Sure.
no, actually, no, that's fine. Actually, I had my whole Zoom off. I was still looking at Bami. Anyway, sorry, there's been a rash of healthy interest in internships within the community, which is awesome. We do a number of internships and have been for a few, well, 2 years now, I guess. We end up doing internships in a few ways. So some of those are through programs like Google Season of Docs, Google Summer of Code. We've chatted with the Major League Hacking folks in the past and are doing a little bit of chatting with them right now. We haven't gotten engaged in Outreachy, but we have been engaged in Community Bridge. And this post from yesterday, what is today? I just said it's the 23rd. Yeah, this post from this week says that we're participating in some service mesh centric Community Bridge projects, and they're kind of described toward the bottom of the post, I think. And so there's been a lot of interest. It's been great. There are only so many internships to go around. We do Layer 5 as a company does offer direct internships. It was actually just in the process of offering about 5 of them to various community members. And so some internships come with stipends, some don't. Some of you, so clearly for my part, I think internships are a good idea. I also will recognize that, well, maybe I'll make a quick analogy and say, those of you who have attended high school or attended university, you go there, there's a structure to the learning path. There are learning paths defined. There are books that you can read and lectures to listen to, teachers to engage with. I think you could say much of the knowledge, maybe not the wisdom, but maybe, I don't know, much of the knowledge that you could learn about a particular subject, you could probably go over, pick up the book, read through the same text, do the labs or do the things, and you probably walk away with about the same knowledge. Which is to say that you don't necessarily have to be in a structured environment to gain that same experience or gain that same knowledge. For my part, I'm a perpetual procrastinator, and I need people making me feel uncomfortable about not hitting deadlines. Like, I need deadlines. And for me, a large part of what an internship or university is about is, hopefully the Zoom is still coming through okay, but it is about accountability. People saying, here's the thing to do, here's a chapter to read, there's an exam coming and there's a deadline here, you got to do these things. And it's helpful. Anyway, the reason I'm drawing this analogy is to say, I consider you could still, if you didn't have to have the deadline, if you were stronger than me and could force yourself to read the book, you'd probably gain the same knowledge. And suffice, so what I'm saying here is there are only so many internships. For those that inevitably don't make it into an internship, that doesn't mean that you can't gain the same knowledge or even more by just engaging meaningfully on an aspect of a project here. If you've done that, by the time you're done, at least I'll speak for my part, we will have had quite some relationship. We will have talked a lot, which means that for my part, anyone who's giving of their time, hopefully learning things here, but giving and making the community better and the projects better. I'm going to do everything within my vast power to help you, which could mean all kinds of things. Introductions to people. People have gotten lots of jobs through here. Letters of reference, elevation of the works that you're doing, talking on stage, writing a book, giving some training, all kinds. There's just all kinds of things to do. And I guess my point is, we're going to go off and do some internships. If it turns out that you don't land one of those, fear not. Step up to the plate and engage anyway. You will get nearly all the same benefits. So, okay, that's part of it. The other, so people have been asking, hey, the internship looks pretty neat. I'd like to learn more. I'd like to get the internship. How do I best go about doing that? The answer is pretty simple. And if you think about it for a moment, it's kind of intuitive. The way to best position for an internship is engage, do something. Hey, I make not shy about saying the internships are not assigned fairly. Not at all. Or maybe they're assigned very fairly, which is to say, if you're here, you're showing up, you're being impactful, you're learning, you're helping, you're doing what you can. Those are the individuals that get an internship. Like, actually, in many respects, like, that's very fair. So the answer is, if you want an internship, I'm kind of spending a long time on this because there's been like 50 something people that have asked me in the last week, you know, how to land one of these. And it's just that, it's identify an area of need, pick it up, go forward. If you're being impactful, all that we're going to want to do is reinforce that and help support you in doing that. If this round goes by and you either don't land one directly or through one of these other programs. By the way, Shriti, if you could visit the layer5.io, maybe just the main site itself, or the slash programs link. It just lists out the fact that Layer 5 offers direct internships, but also through these other programs. What I was going to say is, if you don't land one right now, this is our second year in Google Summer of Code, second set of quarters in Community Bridge. This is our first time in Google Season of Docs, and actually your host, Shriti Chandra, is our first Google Season of Docs intern. So if you have questions on this, which I suspect many of you will, there's 50 people that have asked. If you imagine that to go catch up with 50 people one-on-one for just half an hour, that's a week, or that's a long time, which means that having that conversation, which means that also scheduling of those conversations is going to go to those who are being the most impactful first. There are many people who are drive-by inquirers, meaning they want the thing, but not bad enough to hang around to get it. And so if you want it that bad, I'll make sure that you get one way or the other. All right, yeah, if you have questions, ping me and I'll try to get back to you. I've had to apologize to a few people for the delay in responses, but.
I think you're forgetting MLH.
Say it again. Oh,
I
MLH.
think you're forgetting MLH.
Yeah, since it's kind of a tentative, since we're not confirmed just yet, we didn't list it here. I think one of the contributors listed it on Meshery.io, and that's okay. It's slightly in advance of where we are, but yeah. That's it. Anyone have a burning question on that before we go into other topics? I'm super pumped that people are asking. That's fantastic. We're going to go do a lot of internships. I expect we might be doing about 10 of them. I don't know. Depends. We're at least doing 5. Cool. All right. The first topic up. So into Meshery development stuff. First topic was, well, I was hopeful that Clement might, who's just joined the community, he's been getting familiar with the code base and things. I was just gonna suggest he look at this area, but I don't think he's on, so we will catch him next time. It actually means that
He might come on later. I'll give him a ping. If he does, we can circle back
nice.
to this.
Cool. And if he doesn't, there's a ton of other things for Clement to do. So if you're here and you're looking to work on Golang things, this might be something for you to pick up opportunistically. It's not beholden to Clement. I was just going to suggest it to him. So the topic is that we've recently created 2 release channels for Meshery, a stable release and an edge release. Right now, when anyone downloads Meshery and begins to just use it, unbeknownst to them, they have implicitly chosen to use the stable release or to be on the stable channel. As it stands in the project currently, there isn't control or facilities. How do I say this? There are these 2 channels. Users can switch between the channels. It is A, not documented other than here, B, not convenient or easy to do. And so the ask is, or the notion is, we would like to make this easy, both inside of Meshery's UI, in the settings area, you should be able to like switch between stable channel and edge channel. By the way, these 2 release channels, stable means that we release less frequently. Things are better tested. You should expect to be able to point, that you would have less issues there. I think this is fairly intuitive for all of us. But people might need to switch back and forth between the channels because they might be looking for this new feature that's out on Edge. And we should make it easy to switch back and forth. One of the ways, there's 2 ways in which we would like to be able to support people switching. One is inside Meshery's UI, just go to settings and kind of, toggle the switch, the UI component that is not there today. The other way is to use Meshery CTL to be able to do something like Meshery CTL system, channel, and then identify edge or stable. So that's actually a fairly simple thing to go create, and it's a little bit of manipulation of YAML. So, any comments on this topic, or anyone who's really keen on that and wants to jump on it before we talk to Clement about it, because it's still fair game at this point?
Okay, hello.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to ask questions about the Meshery UI, not about this one, though.
Nice. Yeah, please. That's fantastic. Yeah. Drop that into the topics if you would. Just inside the Google Doc. We should definitely cover that. Like, hey, what technologies are in Meshery UI? How do I get started? Is there kind of a good issue to pick up on? Totally.
Yes, I'm very much interested in that. Like, I would like to know the repository for the Meshery UI.
It's the same one as Meshery itself. So actually put it down as a topic if you would, and we'll talk about that as well. We'll talk about all the components in there.
Okay.
All right, nice. The next topic up, if no one has any, anyway, that invitation for takers on the release channel stuff is open through half an hour after the end of this call, after which we'll go out, talk to Clement. Abhishek, is he with us? Yeah, he is. Abhishek, do you want to talk about the open PR that's there for SMI conformance, and kind of, you want to talk about where we are overall with that operation?
Yes, sure. So we have like a couple of PRs in different places, basically on OSM and Kuma adapters, and the major change PR on Meshery repo, and also uh, a bit of them on Learn DFI as well. So all of these are in transition state at the moment, if I'd say. Uh, so that there are some dependency errors. So the implementation wise or the feature wise, everything has been uh, on track currently. But when it comes to passing the checks and shipping it properly as a release, we're facing some difficulties on that. And some of them are dependent on a couple of bugs from outside. And so yeah, we're figuring our ways around it. So I I have. So do you want me to post the links or sort of show you what exactly? Yeah.
Yeah, totally. As a matter of fact, I was just doing that while you were.
Okay. I'll just share my screen.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Okay. This is the video. Is the screen visible?
Yep, it is.
Okay. So there is one here, which which is purely a dependency update that we are stuck with, and they've tried sort of rendering the packages. This is purely Golang specific. This is the Kuma adapter that we're talking about here, and we've tried several ways to fix the checks before making release, and we, we've we sort of made it for 2 or 3 checks, but there are still 3 more checks that is yet to be passed, and this basically depends on a third-party package that the CI is not able to fetch. And yeah, so this is the same case for the OSM adapter as well. So because they both run using the same package version, so they are the same dependency check errors. Apart from that, the Meshery repo has the changes ready for the recent feature that we worked on, basically to bring up the table of semi-conformance into the UI. And this is still pending because of the hanging checks that are running on adapters right now. If that is done, then this is totally good to go because we've tested this by building locally and it works just fine. So yeah, and we've managed to pass all the checks as well. So this has nothing to do. This has the only blocker that this has is from the adapters. Uh, and apart from that, there is Learn Layer 5 PR, in which we are facing a bit of challenge when it comes to the release. So one of the action stage has been failing with the dependency again, which is Golang specific. This is also we're just working on the fix for this. So yeah, so these are the couple of places where we're facing challenges, and apart from that, if these are solved, then we're good to go to sort of make a release. Yeah, that's pretty much it. There's nothing much apart from these.
All right. Anybody has any questions related to that?
So just to add some context, the 2 community bridge internships that opened up, one or both of them have very much to do with what Abhishek was just showing. And that is that Meshery is the official tool for validating whether or not a given service mesh is service mesh interface or SMI compliant. And so Yep, that's what the first Community Bridge internship is about. It's half about SMI and it's half about SMP, Service Mesh Performance. So for context.
Right. All right, if that's all, moving on to the next topic. Nikhil, would you want to take this up?
Yeah. So, am I audible?
Yep, you are. Do you want me to share my screen? In case
No,
your
I
laptop
will.
is still... Okay,
No,
go
no, I
ahead.
will. Yeah. So there has been an enhancement in the Meshery CTL recently for the development of Meshery test profiles, but a UI part of that was left over. So I was working on that and giving some context before moving forward. So since we have a performance page where we run performance test again and again, so it would be good to have a test profile where the user can save his preferences, and a profile will be generated for the user, and he can simply run a profile test from the test profile itself by clicking on a button instead of continuously adding the same details again and again. Suppose he wants to do a test for google.com, for example, but just want to edit some values and perform the same test. So instead of entering the data again and again, the user will have a test profile saved, and he can just click on a button and run the test. So we have this feature being implemented in Meshery CTL currently, but the UI part which lacks. So I was working on it. It's been a while now. Not able to give much time to it. So yeah, I have some progress over here. I will be showing that in just a second. So this is basically the performance test profile, the page which will get open up when the user first logs in and doesn't have any profile created. So on clicking this button, create a test profile, the user will be redirected to the performance page.
Nikhil, I'm going to risk being rude and interrupt just for a moment, just because I can help myself, but give context for everyone else. I think you might have said this, but I want to be sure that everyone understands that what Nikhil is doing here is well, it's actually quite powerful. It's pretty convenient. Today, if you've used Meshery, you can see that you can go over to a performance area, fill in a form to run a performance test. Meshery will generate load, calculate statistics on how well the mesh is doing, etc. Graph a chart, all these things. It'll do some mathematics that that are over my head, or no. But the pain in the rump with that is that, well, if you want to rerun the same test or run a test of a different configuration, you have to go back and fill back in the form. And when you want to run it again, you have to go back and fill in the form. And what Nikhil is trying to achieve here, and will achieve here, he's got half of it's done, is the convenience of filling in the form, identifying the fact that you're understanding that you're probably going to run this test maybe every time you do a software release, every time you do a configuration change in your service mesh. Maybe you want to see how that has affected the performance of the mesh, that you're going to want to run the same test a bunch. So he's bringing forth the ability to save the parameters of the performance test as a profile, to give it a name and be able to recall that profile and run that same performance test profile over and over. So sorry, Nikhil, I just wanted to make sure people understood.
Yeah, no issues. So this is the page which I guess most of you or all of you in the call are familiar with. So this is a page from where we then run the performance test. And currently, after entering all the fields where the test name is not mandatory, but we can enter that, and we can run the test directly from here, or we can create a test profile which will ask for a profile name which we can enter, and then after confirming it, a new profile will be created with the data that you have entered in this form. And once you have created the profile, you can move back to the profiles page, and your new entered profile will be visible here. I will show you how the profile will look. Just a second. So after currently the data, the backend part of this is not ready, so it's, it's not working. So I've just created dummy by adding static data to show how the profiles will be listed and how we can edit and run the tests profile from the profile itself. So it's reloading. Just give me a minute. Actually, I have got my new laptop, but I have not yet configured it. So I have to power it with this one.
Nice. Nikhil, while that's loading, one piece of feedback is you consider this, if you would. It might be nice that the performance test, the test name that people give in the form today, that test name is perhaps one and the same of the test profile name.
Yeah, we can do that. Actually, I had a question regarding that. That is it possible that we can enter manual name? Because last, which I know from the update from Kanishka, the test ID gets generated automatically, which is stored, through which we are actually the profile ID, through which we can get the profile later on. So can we add a test name, means profile name alongside it?
Yeah, sorry. So that was a question, right? Like, hey, could we have two separate ones?
A profile ID as well as a profile name.
For sure. Having, like, we want to proliferate IDs every which way. It should be like the Oprah show. Like, you get an ID, everybody gets an ID. Like, they're super cheap. We can spin up a GUID all the time. And we should definitely every object, everything in here should have its own identifier. Every instance of a profile of a performance test run, and every performance test profile, these will be different things. As a matter of fact, at some point, for some advanced users, they may come over and they may say, look, we have this long running soak test, as an example, that we run once a week. We want to make sure that our software is doing well, that our environment is doing well. Now, there's not really much that changes for them in that profile. So they want to go back and play it, on a weekly basis. At some point, though, they decided to add 2 more nodes to their cluster. So at some point, they changed their environment. And that's significant. Like, that's going to affect the behavioral characteristics of what's going on. We're going to want to empower them with a faucet, with either the ability to version their performance test profiles so that they could say, look, this is still the same profile. It's still our normal weekly soak test, but when we compare historically over time, something changed. And it could be something that they changed in the profile itself. Maybe they decided not to run it for an hour every week, but like 90 minutes every week. Or they added the two new nodes to their clusters. It may not be a version that's the most appropriate faucet to track this change. It might be more of like, well, an annotation, a label, if you will, just so that as they're looking back historically. So anyway, I'm getting into a deep example. I guess my point is, yeah, we want to give an ID to every object. Yeah, having a name, I think, like when just from a UX perspective, if you go over to the performance test page, people are, if again, like I'm gonna be self-centered here and make a guess that there are some other people in the world like me that will go to a page, and when the first field says test name, and they all of a sudden have to draw upon their creative juices to like come up with a name for this stupid thing. Like I can barely do it every time I face that text field. So my point is, if they've done it once there, and then they go to save it as a profile, if we're going to ask them for yet another name and ask them to muster all of their creativity for a second time, then we minimally should suggest to them that it is test one, that it is the same name as the test that they've given it. But I actually would argue that we just shouldn't ask them again. It should just be the name of the test is the name of the test profile as well. The IDs, though, totally different. Because this, when you click add test profile and you get a modal that says, give it yet another name, you're like, well, I thought this was test one. Like, what do you, so that's, does anyone else have an opinion there?
I'm just coming up to speed. I'm too new to have an opinion on everything. So, as you know from the last meeting, thank you.
Sure.
So, means, taking on your point, if we add the test name as the profile name, then considering the way the current backend has been configured, I guess we get a unique test name for each of them. And then on running the profile using the tests using profile, then the same test name will be used again and again. So I think the intention would be to means if we have a profile name, and whenever we run a test using a profile, the test name which will be generated, which will be a UUID, which is a randomly generated ID, and we won't be having that conflict.
Nice. Please continue, Nico.
Yeah, so it's I think adding a profile name would be a better, but if that's repetitive, which I agree the point you mentioned, that if they enter, they think, why is it asking for it again, for the name again? Then I guess we can put the same test name as the profile name, and instead of popping up, showing up the model for entering the name, we can show up a small snack bar stating your profile has been added.
Right. Yeah. Or it could be. So I'm hesitant. So I'll say this last thing and then try to let us move on, because yeah, it could be one of those things where, in fact, the software Meshery does support an individual name, a name for the performance test and a name for the profile. That to facilitate the initial user experience might just be they've given it a name up there. When they click add test profile, that it doesn't give them a choice. It just assumes that they're going to keep the same name between the test and the profile. It creates the profile. When they go over to the profiles, over the profiles page, that it would be at that point that they would have the ability to change the name potentially. We don't have to do that. I think for sure, I think we're agreeing that if there is a separate profile name, that it would be, that field would be auto-populated with the test name as well. Just, understanding that most of the time they'll probably have the same name.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
All right.
So yeah, Shid, you can do it.
Great. That was a really good presentation by the way, Nicole. Congratulations on your new laptop. I hope it gets up and running soon. And moving on, Vijay, do you want to take this away? Is Vijay on call, by the way? I
Yeah.
guess not. All right.
He was here, but I guess he dropped out in between.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll give you a ping and we'll see if we can come back to this at the end of the meeting. Moving on, Kush, do you want to take this up? Kush? All right. Lee, could you give some context for this by the time I try to reach Kush?
Yep, sure. So, folks, speaking of internships, Kush is just wrapping up the Google Summer of Code internship, and he was working on enhancing the performance tests that Nikhil was just showing. He's building in support for a third load generator. This load generator is called Nighthawk. It's from the Envoy project. It does things a little bit differently than the other generators. It's not to say that one is necessarily better than the next, but they have different algorithms that they use to perform statistical analysis of the response time and the latency and the throughput and things. So he's building in support for that. That's interesting, but what makes it really much more interesting is that part of what is being worked on there is the ability not to just, we talked about this, I think, last week. It's like the ability to deploy a distributed set of load generators. So multiple instances of Nighthawk and have them generate load from, Kush, we're on to your, go ahead if you're here. Anyway, go ahead.
So I was just away from keyboard for around a minute, I guess. So the presentation which I wanted to give was that Nighthawk being bundled with Meshery CTL, so that if you just download Meshery CTL, you will be able to use Nighthawk as it is, like which you do with FortIO. Right now, the following feature is not available with WRK2. It needs to be built separately. So the following PR, which I just made, as you can see on the screen, the following PR just adds the Nighthawk bundle with the Meshery CTL, but there were following consequences with this, and the build is failing right now because the Nighthawk Docker file has a different execution point. So this needs further fixing, and I guess we can have a beautiful demo on the community call on Friday for this.
Beautiful. Shriti, we'll have to hold him to that.
Yep.
Cool, good.
All right. I cannot reach Vijay at the moment. Do we have anything else on the agenda today? Mikul, do you want to go ahead with this?
Yes, I can do that. Thank you, Shriti. Hello, everyone. I share my screen, I think. Let me check whether this works. Okay. Maybe.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Is this only a window? Okay, let's try this one. You see my screen?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So recently I've been doing some work on a console adapter, mainly updating to a new version, to the almost latest version of console. And now the next tasks actually involve quite a lot of code refactoring. And in order to do that and feel safe doing that, I was implementing some end-to-end tests using a framework called BUTS, which is a Bash automated testing system. I can just start first go. Let's see whether I haven't run this in a while, so I hope my machine is still working. First, starting the adapter.
Is your Studio Code you're using, or what editor?
No, I'm using IntelliJ. So you see on the left-hand side, so the adapter is running. I'm just running the adapter, not with Meshery. I have a microcase cluster running in the background. And now I can start the end-to-end tests and see whether they work. So what they're doing is they are running a couple of tests to test actually all possible operations that the Meshery console adapter can execute. So this helps me not having to do that manually by spinning up Meshery and going to the web UI. These tests are simple, almost simple Bash scripts. They're a domain-specific language based on Bash and can be used to, for instance, test infrastructure. I use it in quite a few projects. They're quite easy to set up. Quite easy to set tests. A typical test looks like this. For instance, this test should return expected supported operations, like, for instance, an operation called console install, an operation called install book info, and so on and so forth. So BATS is just leveraging the usual Unix command line tools. In this case, I'm using gRPC curl for almost all tests, and calling the adapter supported operations operation or service, and then analyzing the result. Then in the next test, creating a mesh instance and connecting to the Kubernetes cluster, and then applying the operation, which is actually to install console here, and then waiting till all the deployments and the stateful set and the daemon sets are finished before continuing to the next test. Then for each test, it's just executing the operation and then waiting until it is finished, and maybe testing some specific tests for this sample application, for instance. And at the end of the test, just removing the sample application again. Do that for all the sample applications. And then at the end of the test, removing the console installation from the cluster as well. So this helps me to feel safe when I refactor the code. There were absolutely no tests in the Meshery console adapter, and one can sort of like think about which kind of tests do you want to start writing when there are no tests at all. And of course, that can be discussed, but an easy approach is because one doesn't necessarily know how the internals of the system work, but know how the system as a whole is expected to behave. That one starts with these end-to-end tests, for instance. So as you can see, we're already running the book info tests, and everything looks fine so far. and this really helps being able to refactor and test quite quickly without a lot of manual work to do. Wonder whether I can actually share another screen. Where is Teams? Not Teams, Zoom. Not quite
Yeah,
sure.
just in case anyone's feeling poorly for Michu as he's, struggling to find the right screen. And just remember, he's Michu. I can't remember what is it. What is it? A 10K screen you've got in front of you? I can't remember.
No. Actually, I switched up because that wasn't working. So,
okay.
So yes, that was really the 4K screen.
Yeah, that thing that like wrapped around your head, and it was like.
Yes.
Anyway, no.
I have the chat actually here. Maybe this. I have to click this. Next. This is difficult. Here we're getting there. Share screen. Let me test this one.
My screen is panoramic, but it's not wrapped around your head. It's 37-inch, curved. Seems to work all right with everything. Just FYI.
Is it okay? You get the peripheral. You still kind of. Okay, good.
No, you actually see
it's
the.
really kind of again.
Yeah. Do you see now K9S? Yep. Do you see my screen with this K9S interface? K9S. So you just see the end of the test where the console is removed from the cluster and terminating. So testing all operations as they exist now takes about 5 minutes, which is, I think, very practical. Are there any comments or questions? I would suggest that this is useful for all adapters actually to implement.
Any thoughts, Kush?
So it's definitely very helpful, and like it was no small work. It's well known to me and Lee both that how much test do we need for adapters and Meshery both. And the following, like the tests which all have been added by Michael, like they are huge. And yes, they need to be added in all of the adapters.
Yeah. This is awesome. It's been, man, getting the CI down and getting tests down. It's one of those things that gets almost perpetually pushed to the back burner, but that means that every time we go to do a release, it's a scary moment because we're not quite sure that everything is working. It really slows us down. So this is nice. I have a couple of technology questions. Part of, I'll make some statements. Maybe Michu, you can tell me if these are accurate. One of the benefits of using the BATS system is that you can, unlike some of the GitHub actions that we run, you're able to relatively conveniently run the same CI, run the same tests locally. So that I'll pause there. That's true, right? I mean, you were just showing that, I guess. So
yeah.
And is the intention to use that same set of end-to-end test, that same framework within the GitHub actions that we're using to build that into the CI workflow for each build?
That's a great question. We discussed it on the PR as well, and I think we have to take up the discussion when we actually try to do it. My dream is that you actually can run the same thing locally and on a CI, so that you don't have to sort of maintain two things. But I can see that maybe with the GitHub actions that as there isn't a bots action available, so that we maybe have to implement it differently or write our own bats action, which I think might, yeah, I personally, I think I would like to be able to run exactly the same tests, both locally and in the pipeline on the CI server.
Yeah,
and
really.
also, but yeah. But I think when we get there, we just have to discuss it and have to look at the consequences. But my sort of, my dream would be that either it's in these pipelines, or that we have some box somewhere that is running all these tests like every night or every day, or yes, automatically. So yeah.
And to your point, like it's not just, there's kind of two issues with having two separate test frameworks. The one that you mentioned, which is, geez, just the cost of creating them both and sustaining them both. But then also, to the extent that you're seeing failures in one, but not in the other, or like, that's just, that. And so, if, as we look to push forth with bats and potentially run that, continuous, all the time as part of the process, it might be that the creation of an action there is, I'm assuming, is probably relatively straightforward, to the extent that you just, it's a Linux environment that you're grabbing to run. The item that might be a little more, that might make putting this together a little more interesting is the spin up of a small Kubernetes cluster.
Exactly. I was actually more worried about that than getting bats to run. So here I think Shipyard could really be great, Shipyard.io. But I'm not quite sure how this works on in the context of a GitHub pipeline, whether that's easy to actually achieve or not, getting up a Kubernetes cluster there.
Yeah, Kush or anyone else, do you remember Asuko? He had been working with a particular GitHub action that would spin up a small Kubernetes environment, and I can't remember the name of the.
Engineer create kind clusters.
Kind, yeah, okay.
Yeah, kind. So that's Kubernetes in Docker. Yeah.
And but it's a good.
Yeah. I would love to see that. So it would really give, feel us safe, make it feel us safe, so that we actually know that also in a fresh environment that it runs. So we always have a fresh environment to test in.
It's very much needed. I mean, this whole, like, irrespective of the technology, like, this is very much needed. In the Linkerd adapter is where, if memory serves, that's where Asuko was building in the deployment of a kind cluster. I'm just looking through it now. But Mihu, actually, if you don't mind, sort of tagging Asuko and maybe Nick Jackson as well, to discuss a little bit about Shipyard. Asuko and I were having a conversation recently in which, part of, as we look to refactor the Meshery's adapters and provide support for provisioning service meshes in a couple of different ways, because some of those ways are universal and some of them aren't. Like a universal way might be, like, the most universal in a Kubernetes environment might be, here's a set of manifests for a mesh, you just push the manifest. Like, that should be the case, that you should be able to deploy all meshes. Like, there are some service mesh projects that really don't, how do I phrase it? It seems like they don't want you to do that, because they and for good reason, they want you to have a good experience and they want you to customize the deployment. So they want you to use either Helm, or maybe they don't want you to use. Anyway, my point is, it looks like inevitably we're going to probably have to support one or two or maybe three mechanisms of provisioning service meshes. And I'm intrigued at by the possibility of maybe one of those mechanisms being Shipyard. And it's worth a conversation with Nick. He very much so is a friend of the community and wants well for what we're doing. And I think it would maybe help his project as well. So this is, so yeah,
Yes, yeah, that sounds great. Let's follow this up.
Last question here is I think it's obvious that maybe I'll ask it differently. So Meshery CTL is not implicated in the tests, the end-to-end tests that were just being run. That was purely invoking adapter operations without like directly. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Nice. Thank you.
All right, if that's the end of it, with 3 minutes up, sorry for keeping you, everybody. See you next time. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye.